Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our discussion on proactive heat risk management. My name is Josie Lorina-Baker. I've worked with FBinsure and our FB Advisors program since its inception in 2006. I'm excited to introduce you to Rob Pinto from Contractors Risk Management. I met Rob about a year ago now, working with one of our FB Advisor clients. I attended one of their trainings on heat illness prevention. I learned so much at that training, and I'm so excited we get to share some of that information with you now. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today. Would you share a little bit about yourself and what CRM does?
Absolutely, and first off, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone about heat illness prevention. It's a big deal out there, and I work for Contractors Risk Management. We're a safety consulting company out of Concord, New Hampshire. We help our clients in a number of different ways, including writing programs, doing training, doing site inspections. We do some industrial hygiene work. And we help people navigate what to do after accidents or if and when OSHA visits and issue some citations. So we have a lot of experience in this field, and hopefully I can add a little bit today to this topic.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to dive right into it. Please feel free to drop a comment into the chat section if you have any questions. We have Ariel in the background as our moderator today, and she will interject the question for us. If not, we'll have a Q&A section at the end, so please feel free to join in then. All right. So, Rob, what are heat-related illnesses?
Well, there are a number of different types of heat-related illnesses. It can be as simple as heat cramps. It can be, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and there are some others, kind of in between, that aren't as serious as heat exhaustion and heat stroke. But those are the two that we, primarily focus on. Those are the ones that cause the biggest issues out there for workers and just people in general.
I'm excited that we're actually doing this now in June, and it's getting to be really hot out because this is timely. Why is heat illness prevention such a big deal?
I mean, the effect that it can have on you, it's really not just an illness. It can be something that's fatal, based on the most recent data we have from Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2019, there were about 43 heat-related deaths and about 3,500 hospitalizations.
Wow.
And the construction industry counted for about a third of those,
Wow.
which is pretty alarming. And again, those are reported things. A lot of these illnesses don't get reported. People don't end up in the hospital when they probably should have.
Absolutely.
Or maybe a death doesn't really get counted as one when it could have. So we have the personal impact of it, and also OSHA has recognized this, and National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, ANSI, American National Standards Institute, they've all recognized that this is a big problem. And as we continue on these hot months, these record high months, over the last few years, it's only going to continue to be a problem unless we do something about it.
Great. And that's why we're doing this today. We want to talk a little bit about best practices, how to identify someone who's experienced a heat-related illness and other contributing factors. So we'll go through that today. So what are some of the biggest contributing factors to heat-related illnesses?
A lot of people just think about the environment, right? We have temperature, humidity, whether the air is flowing or not. But, there's really, we can call it 5 primary factors. We have those environmental factors, again, the temperature, the humidity, airflow, direct sunlight versus indirect sunlight. We have our activity level. What are we actually doing out there? How hard are we working? How hard are we exerting ourselves? We have different personal risk factors. If somebody has a pre-existing condition, some sort of medical condition, high blood pressure, if their fitness level is lacking in one way or another, if they're taking certain medications. One of our clients, we had a guy that, a few years back that ended up in the hospital because of severe dehydration. It was later found out that one of the medications he was on caused him to sweat profusely. So that really contributed, to his condition there.
Mhm.
And then we also have some other underlying factors, reflection. If you're a roofer working on a white roof, right, you basically have two suns, one above you, one below you. And, if you're working, near something that's giving off heat. So there are a number of different factors. I think the two primary ones would be the environmental factors. And then also, our level of exertion, again, our
The daily
activity
limit of
level, our
fitness.
activity
Mhm.
level. And actually, I also meant to include their PPE as well. If we're doing certain tasks that require us to wear,
What-
a respirator, personal protective equipment. So
Sure.
whether a respirator or like a Tyvek suit, that's obviously going to increase
Oh,
our,
sure.
our temperature.
So I have a question. I know we're talking primarily about people that work outside. There are still heat-related illnesses inside, right?
That's
Do
correct.
you see those?
We as a company don't really see them, but no, we have heard cases, instances of this.
Restaurants.
Restaurants, again, working in a
Factories.
factory,
Mhm.
working near equipment that's giving off, excessive amounts of heat.
Mhm.
We don't really consider those as we would, again, people working outside,
Sure.
because again, that's where we really think that these heat related illnesses come from.
But even people
That's a great
that
point.
have people that, even our clients that have indoor facilities still have heat exposure issues as well, that we still need to be cognizant of that.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
I have another question, and I've run into this, actually, I think with one of our the clients that we share. How does culture affect this? And I'm not talking necessarily about culture. I'm talking about employee, the workplace culture. How does that play a part into this?
It plays a huge part. For lack of a better term, I'll use the old school mentality, where it's go go go. You don't need a drink of water. You don't need to rest. It's all about getting the work done, which is not the best for the employee. For the bottom line, yeah, it looks great at the end of the day, but that is a huge contributing factor. Even taking what they do after work. A lot of people don't really consider the effects of what they do tonight, how that's going to affect you tomorrow. So that old school mentality might be, in that culture might be, hey, let's go get some beers after work. And then, maybe we'll go watch a game, and not really hydrating, preparing for the next day. And you're starting off the next day
Totally
on a bad
dehydrated.
note. And
Yeah.
we've even had some instances of that with, companies that are, traveling for work. Maybe the crew is out staying in a hotel for the week. Again, after work, they're going out, they're having some drinks, they're having a good time. Next day, it's 90 degrees.
Oh,
And we
goodness.
have somebody, that's had, some sort of heat related illness. And we've seen examples of that, as recent as last summer, with one of our clients. So I do think that culture does play a big, part of it. And that's really why we need to, one of the reasons why we need to train people and get more awareness out there as to, again, what these different factors are and the potential effects of not preparing for yourself for heat related illness.
Great. Now, and this is probably a little bit more psychosocial, how do you suggest that employers change that culture?
By offering a supporting environment and really putting rules into place.
From the top down.
To the top down, and starting with a program that you're training everybody on.
Sure.
We can talk, about doing anything, but
Sure.
until we put that plan to paper, we train people on it, we make this a company policy, though these are, how often we're going to rest on days when it's this hot. We're going to provide water to everybody. We're going to train the foreman to recognize these conditions and make sure that they're instructing the workers that, hey, no, I know you want to keep going, but we need to take a break, and really trying to drive that culture change. And, anybody that's been, in the industry, any industry for a while would know that culture does not change overnight.
No,
You
you're
know,
right.
it has to be
Mhm.
repeated. The metaphor we use is like turning a cruise ship, right?
Mhm.
You know, we're not turning a little dinghy around. We're,
Mhm.
we're turning a cruise ship. We're trying to get this whole thing to change in a different direction, and that has to start from the top down.
You're right. You're right. They have to buy in at the top level in order for everybody to get that. And
Right.
that's a great point.
And really
Thank you.
show the employees that they're buying in,
Yes.
not just telling them to do it, but following through.
So OSHA is a big topic right now. And I know I've been getting blasts from OSHA lately about their new heat national emphasis program coming down the pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is it? Like what is this new initiative they have going on?
Well, first we'll start with what is a national emphasis program, or any sort of emphasis program. So OSHA might see different areas where they're seeing an increase in accidents or fatalities. Maybe there's a new standard that they're trying to roll out, like silica. There's one on
Yes.
that, and that's a whole other conversation for another day. And then in this case, heat illness. They've recognized that there's a big issue with heat illness prevention or lack of, and so they're trying to gather more information and really highlighting this. So what does that actually mean? So when there is a national emphasis program, they can open an inspection based on that program. So in most cases, OSHA just can't drive by a job site and say, I want to stop there.
Sure.
There's 7 different reasons. I'm not going to go through all of them. But they can't just stop in because they want to. With this national emphasis program, any day that it's above 80 degrees, and that's taking the heat index. So heat and humidity, any day it's above 80 degrees, they can stop at job sites and open an inspection. During this national emphasis program, which is running from April of 2022 through April of 2025, they're primarily out there for compliance assistance. So they're going to come out and give you advice on what you're doing.
If I have them out, will they penalize me if they find I'm not working in accordance to the current standards?
Potentially they could.
Okay.
There is not a specific OSHA standard on heat illness prevention at this point.
Okay.
But they do have a standard that they use. It's called the General Duty Clause, otherwise known as 5A1, saying that as an employer, you have to provide a safe and healthy workplace to your employees. So for everything that they don't have a standard for, it's kind of a catch-all. But in order for them to cite on that, there has to be some sort of consensus standard out there. There has to be, something out there in the industry, and we typically look to ANSI, American National Standards Institute. Earlier this year in January, ANSI, along with ASSP, American Association of Safety Professionals, issued the first consensus standard on heat illness prevention. And the anticipation is OSHA will use that as a guideline to create their own standard.
Sure.
So although they don't have a standard currently, if you're found to be egregious, or if you do have a fatality or a significant incident, let's say a few employees end up in the hospital, they could still cite you, although they don't have their own standard at this time. If that makes sense.
Sure. But we should still feel comfortable calling them in proactively to help work with us to develop. If an employer wanted to call OSHA in proactively during this emphasis program, they could have them in to help them work on a heat illness.
So you can call OSHA to ask a question.
Sure.
Each state has a free consultation program. It's not part of OSHA. It's through the State Department of Labor, but they work alongside with OSHA. So if you wanted to have somebody like that come in, they could certainly do that. That's who I would reach out to, the free state consultation program.
Okay, that's great to know. Do you know what some of the, I know they've been working on this. I've read some of the papers on the OSHA site about some of the changes that they're projecting. Are there any standards or any requirements that they're going to be putting in place with this? Something that we could count on, maybe.
Not explicitly. I mean, uh, again, it's going to start with most of their standards. You're right. Again, we need to have a written program
Yes.
that talks about heat and illness prevention. So that will be a requirement. We're going to need to have to train employees on the plan and, preventative measures. So that will certainly be, a part of it. After that, it's kind of murky. The ANSI standard and, that they put together with ASSP is a non-mandatory. So there's guidelines there, which, they'll kind of model after. But in terms of what's actually going to be in the standard is up for debate. And it's still, I know they've started to put some stuff together and there's review commissions. I know certain states like Florida are pushing back on this because an 80-degree day in Florida is a cold day.
Yes, it is.
So, in terms of, how that's all going to shake out, it's really tough to tell at this point.
Okay.
But there is some really good documentation from NIOSH. They have a chart that we refer to, we incorporate into the programs that we write, and it's a work rest schedule. So depending on what the heat index is for that day, if you're in direct sunlight versus indirect, it takes into account the worker's activity level. Again, they're doing light work or they're doing heavy work, moving stone around. And that will give you a work rest schedule. It might say work for a half hour, take a 5-minute break.
Based on your level of exertion.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I would imagine that there would be something along those lines, or at least looking for something like that, because that is, one of the documents that's been in the NIOSH program for a while. NIOSH put out recommendations, I think it was back in 2016 on heat-related illnesses.
So one thing you just mentioned I want to touch upon, because I'm not sure everybody has this in their safety manuals. Employers should have a heat illness prevention standard in their safety manuals?
Yes, there should be a heat illness prevention program. And if you haven't done one already, I would recommend doing it soon, because once OSHA issues a standard, I can almost guarantee that will be a requirement.
That's actually something that CRM works with employers to do. Right?
Absolutely.
Safety manuals.
Yep.
I know you do that because I get a lot of questions for that a lot from our clients. So that is a service that you guys do provide as well, right?
Yes.
That's good to know. Okay.
And we do have a heat illness prevention program that we put together in 2022 when this first came out, the National Emphasis Program.
Do you think this, when they actually put this into play, do you think they'll give a timeline, like everybody needs to meet these guidelines by X date, or will be like normal OSHA where you need to do this by last Tuesday?
This National Emphasis Program that's been going on, or by the time the standard is issued, will have been going on for 3 years, I think would be a grace period enough.
Okay. Okay. So we need to get on this, is what you're saying.
People have known this is coming down the pike. They need to be prepared for it.
Good. This is good to know. I was not aware of that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good information. We need to start being proactive with that. Let's talk a little bit about prevention. What are some of your key prevention tips?
Just going off, what's out there again from NIOSH, it's water, rest, and shade. Providing, water to the employees, sports drinks as well are really good, because, water only takes you so far. When you're sweating, you're out there, working, you lose a lot of electrolytes as well. So you want to mix some of those in. Just water all day is really maybe not the best thing for you. Just the same thing with just sports drinks all day is not the best for you. So, having a balance, I would say more water than sports drinks, but certainly at the end of the day, sports drink would be good, like a Gatorade or Powerade, or, for the younger generation, the Prime.
Oh my goodness.
I know all the kids love the Prime.
Oh my goodness, my son too.
Oh, you got to see the lineup my son has in his room. He's got every bottle. Oh yeah. But regardless, so again, hydration key. Rest, working in rest breaks. Again, depending on activity level, heat. That's where that chart from NIOSH is a really good guide for that. It kind of gives you an idea of what we should be expecting there. And then providing shade to the employees when they're, working outside, a shady area that they can, rest. take a break at. Actually, California has been way ahead of this for years.
Really?
California has their own OSHA. It's a state program. It's called Cal OSHA.
Mhm.
They've required a shaded rest area on job sites as far back as, as I can remember working with CRM, and that's going back to 2010. So California,
Wow.
I think has always been the model of what to do for heat-related illnesses and how to prevent those.
So tell me, if say I'm working, my employees are working on a giant, we're in Boston. They're redoing a building, giant job site, building it from the ground up. How do I do that? There's no trees there. Like, how do I provide that for them in the middle of July? How would I go about doing that?
Maybe adding a job trailer that's like a brake trailer,
Mhm.
or even putting some pop-up tents out
Oh, that's a good idea.
around the site. Just some areas where they can go. Obviously, we're not going to have them in shade while they're working.
Sure.
That ideally that would be nice. I've seen some masonry companies that are building walls that'll set up little pop-up tents, but again, it's not a perfect world. We're not going to be able to do that all the time, but certainly having an area where they can go to rest. I've seen, some companies will, allow the workers to go in the trucks and just run
That
the air
was my next
conditioning.
question.
So, there are ways that we can, kind of work around this, but yeah, there needs to be some planning on shade, and then also planning on your day. What if it's going to be, hot later in the day, but it's cool in the morning. Maybe we do our strenuous activities in the morning when it's cooler,
Mhm.
and then leave some lighter stuff for later in the day when the temperatures are really hot. There's a really good tool for that kind of helps you plan your day. OSHA, along with NIOSH, created a heat safety app a few years ago.
Really?
So I have it on my phone. It's really nice. It pulls your location. It pulls the projected heat and humidity for the day. So it gives you a heat index,
Mhm.
and it'll tell you your risk level for the day. It'll give you an hour by hour breakdown. And it'll give you some tips on what to do. It shows you signs and symptoms, what to do in case of an emergency. So that's a really nice tool. And again, because water, rest, shade, and planning are really what
Mhm.
what we really need to do to help keep people again from experiencing some of these heat-related illnesses.
So the app is real time based on the location.
Absolutely.
Too. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Do you know what it's called?
It's the OSHA/NIOSH heat safety tool. If you type in heat safety tool, it pops right up.
That's awesome. I'm going to add that to my phone. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, Ariel's going to pipe in with a question
Sure.
for us.
So I know that we were just talking about a static job site, somebody's working on construction. Can you talk about a toolkit or anything for trucks, people who are really mobile throughout the day?
Well, one of the benefits of that is we have some air conditioning and some shade built into that. And again, providing water. I see a lot of mobile crews like that where they'll go to the shop in the morning. They'll have a cooler in their truck. They can load it up with ice at the shop and put load it with water or Gatorade or whatever they need there. We're also seeing a lot more companies using like cooling towels, providing cooling towels to their employees. Seeing some different hard hats or some neck coverings. Just a little bit more that we can do to provide some extra shade and again, with a mobile crew like that, again, you get some rest and you get some shade and some air conditioning going from site to site. So I think that could be helpful as well.
So at a minimum, as Ariel was just talking about, if you have people that travel to a job, like let's say landscapers or someone that's taking a truck and bringing employees to a job, they should have water, maybe some sports drinks, and hopefully air conditioning in the truck,
Yeah.
so that the employees can get some shade.
Right.
Is there something else that you think that would be like a bare minimum they should have on site with them?
Sunblock is always good.
Yeah.
It is a form of PPE that we should be using. And then again, really just training and awareness. If when we have multiple people on the crew, if we can recognize signs and symptoms, we can look out for each other.
Mhm.
With heat illness, whether it's well, any temperature related illness, I should say, whether it's heat illness in the summer or hypothermia in the winter, other people tend to recognize our symptoms before we do.
This is a great point. So when we were first talking about this, we were saying we need to have top-down buy-in, and supervisors, management, foremen, people like that need to be educated on this. But what you're saying right now is that everybody should.
Yeah.
So this should be a toolbox talk, basically. Employees that are out working in the field, management should work with them so they can recognize the symptoms, because we're working together here. I'm the
Right.
one who's going to notice you probably before somebody else, right?
Right.
So that's something that we should, that they should implement into their system, especially this time of year,
Yeah.
just to refresh their staff on that.
And I would take it a step further, Josie, than a toolbox talk, because a toolbox talk really should be more of a reminder
Sure.
of things.
Okay.
So I think there should be, you know, a classroom training.
Oh,
And
entire separate training.
And then in addition to that,
Mhm,
you know, maybe a periodic toolbox talk. You
mhm.
know, if we've had like a little bit of a cool spell and we're expecting a heat wave, maybe that's a good time to break out a toolbox talk and say, hey, remember
Great
these
idea.
things that we talked about? You know, we want to really be looking out, you know, for those.
That's a great idea. So I'm guilty of this. I'm not going to tell you that that's the first water I've had all day, because it might be, but I drink a lot of coffee. I know energy drinks are a big thing. They're not my thing, but they're a big thing. What are and I know that coffee negates the water consumption. How would you recommend employers work around that, or address that with their staff? Is it education? Is it?
It's education. I mean, and yes, coffee, different, you know, things with caffeine will affect your, you know, ability to, you know, to regulate heat. You know, they tend to raise your body temperature. They dehydrate you.
Mhm.
But
Is there a general ratio? So like, I'm not going to give up my coffee. I'm sorry. You're not making me give it up. Is there a ratio that you would suggest? Like, is there a standard out there? Like 1 cup of coffee, you need to have 2 bottles of water to replace that?
none that I'm aware of.
Sure.
Somebody much smarter than me might have some insight on that.
Listen,
But
me
you know,
too.
I tell people, and I try and do the same thing. If you're drinking a coffee on the way to work, try to follow it up with a bottle of water.
That's smart.
And then, you know, again, you know, there are different, you know, schedules on how much, you know, water or sports drinks you should have, you know, a day. You know, they're saying when you're working strenuously, I think it's, you know, like 20 ounces every 15 minutes, which sounds outrageous.
Whoa.
You know, it's a lot. That's a lot to be drinking.
That's 20 ounces.
But that's again, somebody that's not out there every day, but we really need to do our best to hydrate. Now, we're not going to tell people they can't have a coffee, or they
Sure.
can't have an energy drink.
Mhm.
But again, you know, educating them on, you know, how that can affect them throughout the day, and really encouraging them to hydrate more in a proper way.
Sure.
Again, water, different sports drinks, not energy drinks, sports drinks.
How can, well, I think we'll talk about that in a little bit, but how can I tell as a person that I'm starting to get dehydrated?
Well, there's one kind of easy way to tell. You know, when you're in the
tell.
bathroom.
Oh, okay.
You know, see what color your urine is. You
Okay.
know, if you
Well, that's valid.
you know, if your urine is clear, then you're really well hydrated.
Mhm.
If it's, you know, dark yellow or, you know, again approaching that, then you're dehydrated. You're approaching dehydration. So
That's a real good tool. I
you
mean,
know,
it's a basic tool, but it
you know, because a lot of the fluid that we're going to lose is through sweating, right? And
Yes.
so if we're not properly hydrated, what's, you know, and again, our urine is coming out pretty yellow, it means, well, we
Mhm.
don't have enough to really clean our body out.
Mhm.
Whereas if it's clear, now you're, you know, you're on a better path. And if you're waiting until you're thirsty to drink, you've already started to become dehydrated.
Okay.
You have to really kind of train yourself to take regular, you know, hydration breaks before you become thirsty. Because at that
Okay.
point, really dehydration is already, you know, started to some extent.
And that should be part of the employee education when they're going over this with them.
Absolutely.
So what is heat tolerance? Can you explain that a little bit to us?
I think it's easy to explain to anybody that's been living in New England. Just think about, 50 degrees, right? In October, 50 degrees, everybody's grabbing a hoodie, right? And they're getting, they're trying to warm up. In March, 50 degrees, we see people in flip-flops and t-shirts.
Yes.
So it takes our body, a period of time to adjust to temperatures. They say it takes about 2 weeks to really, working in heat. Again, we could take somebody that's, been here, living here. It's mid-August. They've been outside at the beach every day. Now they start to go work for a company where they're doing strenuous work. They've been used to the heat, but they haven't been used to working in the heat. And
Yeah.
that can be, a different impact on your body. So we really need to, take the time with new employees or as the temperature changes extremely, to make sure that people have enough time to acclimate. The word that OSHA uses is acclimatization. And we need to take time to acclimate to the heat. And that's a really big emphasis. They say between 50 and 70% of heat-related fatalities in construction, or actually, I'm sorry, in the workplace in general, happen within the first couple of days of a new employee. They're
Really?
not acclimated to working in that heat. Usually a newer employee is going to get the crap jobs, for a lack of a better term. They're going to be working the hardest, because all these workers with seniority, like, well, they're going to do that.
Sure.
They're not ready to do it. Their body hasn't adjusted to working in the heat. And I think that's part of the reason we've seen, with some of our clients, and particularly the last few years, we've had these really slow springs where, it's 60 degrees, it's 60 degrees, it's 60, all of a sudden it's 85 degrees.
That happened this spring.
And
It's
they're
awful.
out there, working just like they had, and they haven't had an opportunity to adjust to that.
Okay.
It's been, we don't have that slow buildup like we used to have. And I think, particularly with some of the clients that I work directly with, I think that's impacted a lot of their employees.
Absolutely.
And again, these are the ones that get reported to us, because there's a lot, again, going back to that culture that you were talking about earlier, there are a lot of workers that just won't report it, or just think that,
It's cost of doing
they're
business.
just tired that day and not really realizing what's going on with their bodies. And again, the impacts that could and will have.
So you had mentioned that app that you're really good at the acronyms. I'm not. OSHA and what was the other one?
That one was NIOSH.
NIOSH. It's real time based on where we are, the location and everything like that. Do they give you suggestions of what a workday should look like based on that?
They'll give you tips on, what to do, for prevention methods. Again, you can do an hour by hour breakdown, which will tell you your risk level. So it's really up to you, to take that data and to apply it to your day and to plan your day appropriately. Because again, it's across all industries. So for them to do any more than that, I think would be difficult.
Sure. What PPE, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, is what PPE should we always have available to our employees?
Well, this is kind of a tricky one, because PPE is something that's supposed to be provided, by the employer. But really, when it comes to heat-related illnesses, there's not a whole lot that we can provide. Again, sunscreen is always a good one. I take it a step further and I encourage employees to wear a long sleeve shirt. And we think, oh my God, a long sleeve shirt in the summertime, how am I going to do that? That's just going to make me hotter. But in reality, if we're wearing something that's light, it's moisture wicking, it's loose, and loose not to the extent that it's going to cause a safety hazard, right? Because some loose clothing can certainly cause a safety hazard if it can get caught up in something. It takes that direct sunlight off of our body. Again, we want something that's light colored. I think I said that. Dark colors will attract heat. So we want something that's light colored, that's going to reflect the heat. It's going to have some breathability to it. Hopefully something that's SPF rated, because now you don't have to put as much sunblock on. People don't realize at times that you can get a sunburn through a shirt depending on the material of the shirt and
I don't
you know
think I
how
knew
direct
that.
sunlight you're in. You know, because I like sunblock, but I'd rather put on a shirt that I know is going to last the entire day and I'm not going to have to reapply.
Mhm.
And, you know, for, you know, somebody that's out there, you know, working, sweating, they got dirt all over them. I don't really want to apply sunblock more than one time
Yeah,
a day,
that's true.
but we should still be providing it to them. And then again, providing water. And we're starting to, again, like I said, starting to see more companies will provide, you know, like some sort of cooling towel. There's a whole bunch of different products out there that are pretty cool that work really well that, you know, they could put around their neck.
Mhm.
There's hard hat liners that are cooling. We're starting to see more hard hats that have ventilation built into them.
Oh,
Actually saw one guy a year ago. I had no idea what was on his hard hat, but he had a hard hat that had a built-in fan. It's the first
no.
time I've ever seen it and the only time I've ever seen it. And I had to look it up and that thought that was pretty interesting.
And that's a thing.
That's the thing. It was solar powered.
Impressed. Solar power too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
Um,
fancy.
So again, as an employer, it's providing the training, and again, maybe some sunblock, but really educating on them on what they could or should be wearing, you know, to help with this stuff.
So we're to provide, as an employer, I'm to provide water for my employees. Am I required to provide electrolyte-based drinks, or is that just strongly suggested?
No, that's just strongly suggested. You
Okay.
know, the only OSHA requirement along those lines is providing potable water
Okay.
for employees to drink or, you know, wash their hands.
Okay.
Whatever it might be.
So we've talked a lot about prevention and what we need to do. Can you tell me what are some common heat-related illnesses
Um,
or the
it-
progression thereof?
yeah, so I mean, heat cramps is probably, you know, the first sign.
And what is a heat cramp?
Um,
Is it like a running cramp?
yeah,
Okay.
it's just, you know, any other cramp that you would get, you know, different muscle cramps, usually in the legs or the stomach.
Okay.
And that's usually like one of the first signs that you're starting to experience some sort of heat related illness.
Okay.
Sometimes we can get, you know, these cramps because we haven't hydrated well. Now we're thirsty and I take a break and I drink a gallon of water. That's not good for me.
Sure.
You know, that's why we need to have that constant hydration throughout the day, as opposed to just trying to, you know, load up at one time.
Mhm.
There's even been cases of water poisoning. You know, people have died because of things like that. Again, they get so dehydrated and they think, all right, I'm going to drink 2 gallons of water. And then, you know, their body can't handle it.
Mhm.
And your body will go into shock. So, you know, again, you know, there's different ways to get cramps, but again, a heat cramp is one of the first things that we see. And then we start to see, you know, signs of heat exhaustion. And
Okay.
these would be, you know, fatigue, irritability, being like excessively thirsty, start to experience some nausea, some dizziness, you know, really heavy sweating, and just feeling like your body's hot, you
Mhm.
know, just, you know, an elevated, you know, body temperature.
Do they
And
fit at that stage? Do you physically have a temperature? Like, will you have a fever? Is that a sign? Or is it just the actual feeling of it?
that's a great question.
Mm,
And
don't know
I have
either.
some speculations on it, but I don't want to speculate.
That's okay.
I'd rather leave that for an expert. I have thoughts on that, but for today, I don't want to give my thoughts. I'd rather be
That's
factual.
that's
Um,
perfectly fine. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So, you know, once we start to experience heat exhaustion, now the real concern is this somebody that could go into heat stroke? And that's when it can become fatal. And so heat stroke, you know, we have confusion, your speech starts to get slurred, you could have seizures, really heavy sweating, hot or even dry skin. At some point, you will stop sweating.
Mhm.
Very high body temperature. So yeah, I guess so. Rapid heart rate, vomiting. You know, these are things that, you know, this person needs medical attention.
That was my next
Um,
question. If someone gets to that point, we need to get them medical attention
Once
sooner
somebody,
rather than later.
once somebody starts to experience heat exhaustion,
Mhm.
you know, we really want to take that person out of the work environment.
Mhm.
We need to get them into an area where they can rest. We need to hydrate them. maybe provide them some wet towels, even if we don't have cooling towels, wet some shirts, whatever you can, put it around the head and neck to try and get their body temperature down, and just their overall temperature down. That person should not go back to work, even if they're feeling
For the
better.
day.
For the day.
Oh, okay.
You know, again, for heat exhaustion. If they get worse, then they should certainly seek medical help.
Okay.
But yeah, anybody for any heat related illnesses, if they need to stop work for 5 minutes because they're starting to experience a heat related illness, they need to stop for the day. And you know, we've had instances of workers that, you know, came off of the job to rest for a little bit. You know, that they're vomiting, you know, outside the vehicle, and a half an hour later they say, "Oh, I feel good. I'm going to go back to work." And you're just putting yourself in a situation at that point where, you know, things are only going to get worse and could potentially become fatal. Again, if somebody's experiencing heat stroke, confusion, slurred speech, seizures, vomiting, rapid heart rate, we need to do the same thing. We need to get them to a cool area, start the cooling process, and call 911. That is a medical emergency that needs immediate attention.
Oftentimes when people are in that state, they're not with it, if you will. So even if they're against it, we should still make sure that we have them at least looked at to make sure that they're okay, right? Because I know a lot of people are obstinate when they are in that situation.
And that's where, you know, good training for your supervisors really comes into play, because the supervisor is the one that's going to have to make that call. Or they can call their office, but you know, the supervisor is the one that's there. They're watching them. They know how this person typically behaves on a day-to-day basis. We need to make that the decision for the employee at that point. Because yeah, you know, whether it's a culture thing, or again, you know, when we're experiencing that, we're confused, we're not thinking clearly, you know, our body is starting to shut down in different ways. So it's really up to somebody that has training, you know, that's responsible for the crew to say, hey, we need to get this person help.
So this just hit me like a ton of bricks. I understand why you're stressing, why you stress preventative measures so much. I don't think I realized that once you're there, there's no coming back. I don't think I realized that if we let somebody or if somebody gets to that point, that they're off the job site for the day.
Yeah.
I thought we could hydrate them, cool them down, and put them right back to work. That's not the instance.
No, your body will not recover that quickly. It takes, you know, 24 hours, sometimes even more.
Wow.
You
Okay.
know, sometimes it's worth even, you know, depending on how you're feeling, maybe stopping and getting checked out. You know, again, maybe it's not a heat stroke where it's a medical emergency, but maybe you might need some additional hydration.
Okay.
And even the next day, I would make sure that employee has a light day the next day if they're even coming to work at all. Because again, you know, like I talked about earlier, what you do today is going to affect you tomorrow when it comes to heat related illnesses. So if I'm not feeling great at the end of today, and let's say, you know, I'm feeling nauseous, you know, I'm not really able to hydrate to the level I really should, just going right back out tomorrow and doing the same thing is going to put me in a really bad spot. So yeah, it is a longer term thing than people realize. It's not just, oh, I'm feeling a little bit better, I can go. No, once you're pulled, you're done.
Wow. Okay. So as an employer, what should I do in case I have, not as an employer, let me say, as the supervisor on the front line dealing with an employee who is showing these signs, what should I do in case of an incident? Let's say the person's not at the heat stroke level. Like if they're showing the first sign of heat exhaustion and things of that nature. I pull them off the job site.
So I would get them to stop working, you know, maybe get them down to your shaded rest area if you have one, or into the truck, or in any sort of, you know, vehicle with air conditioning. You know, we'll get some, you know, air blowing on them. Again, find different ways to cool them, whether it's cold air, again, you know, cooling packs, towels, ice, take ice and wrap it in a shirt, you know, whatever that method is. Start the hydration. Again, we want them to sip water. We don't want them to start, you know, chugging bottles of water. We want to slowly rehydrate them. And I would call, if you're not able to bring that person somewhere, back to the shop or home, maybe call us, a supervisor at the office and see if we can get this person a ride home.
So don't
Uh,
let them drive home themselves at that point.
I wouldn't, at
Okay.
least for a while, until you're sure that that person is able to, because again, confusion is something that will come into play. If they start to experience, heat stroke, they could have seizures. We don't want somebody driving a vehicle when they're in that condition.
Sure.
Absolutely not. That's a great point.
And when we do, if I did run into a situation where we had a heat incident with one of our employees, what would you suggest I do as a company to mitigate future?
As with
Issue.
any accident or near miss, I would do an investigation, talk to that person as to what they did the night before, what they did that morning in terms of hydrating or not hydrating, what was their activity level, what type of work were they doing, in the heat, were they working strenuously when it was, 95 degrees outside, or I would just try and find out as many facts as we can about that particular incident and see what we can pull from that and what we can learn from it and use that as a training tool.
Sure.
So you talked about toolbox talks earlier.
Mhm.
I always think it's nice when a company will have a near miss or an accident, they'll do some sort of lessons learned from it and talk about that in a toolbox talk.
Mhm.
I mean, let's be honest, a lot of toolbox talks, they're just, most workers are kind of checked out.
Yes.
They're, what do we talk about today? Just sign off on it.
Mhm.
But if it's a real event that happened to one of their coworkers, one of their friends, and they can learn something from it,
Mhm.
there's a lot more engagement there. Maybe they'll talk about their own experiences and start to open up a little bit more. So I think that learning from these different incidents, and using that as a tool for everybody, I think it promotes, a better, safer environment, and it also promotes more employee input into the overall safety
I
program.
love that. I love that. It will get employee buy-in too, if
Absolutely.
we get their opinions on the
Yeah.
situation. Is there anything else you'd want to add right now?
Well, actually, no, I was just going to say, I thought of an example on that. If I have a couple
You
minutes,
too, of course.
one of the heat-related illnesses that I can remember was a worker in Somerville who his responsibility for the day was to water plants. He was walking around with a watering can, watering plants at
Okay.
a big plaza.
Mhm.
It was a landscape maintenance company that was their responsibility.
Okay.
And he stumbled over to a police officer, vomiting on himself at 10:30 in the morning with heat exhaustion, potentially going towards, heat stroke. And this is somebody that was walking around with a watering can all day. They weren't working strenuously. And the more I talked to him, I found out that, yeah, before he went to bed, he had a few beers,
Mhm.
didn't have any water,
Mhm.
got up in the morning, had a coffee,
Mhm.
didn't have any water,
Oh,
went
goodness.
out there and had water in his hand, but never decided to drink any water. And here we are, 10 o'clock in the morning, not the hottest part of the day,
Mhm.
not working strenuously. And he still had a really severe, heat-related illness that could have turned worse if there
Wow.
wasn't help like right there. So
That's awesome. The police officer noticed it too.
so we took that, what we learned from that, and we use that to train everybody else on the importance of preparing, for the day, starting the day before, and again, continuing hydrating throughout the day.
Great. Ariel, do we have any questions from the audience that you want to put forth?
Yeah, I do have a question here. So, can you talk about some common misconceptions or anything to avoid if someone has a heat illness?
I think the biggest is not letting them get back to work, thinking that, it's going to be okay if they, just go right back to work after they hydrated a little bit. Again, thinking that, if you chug a gallon of water or something like that's going to help you. It's really, it's a slow progression. Once you've reached that point, it's a recovery period. It's not something that can just happen instantly by,
Mhm.
again, just drinking a Gatorade or, and also, again, I think it's a cultural thing, thinking that we've done it before, we can do it. Right. I worked in this, heat yesterday. Well, maybe I didn't really recover
Mhm.
well from yesterday, and I pushed through today. That thinking that just because you're tough, you can get through it. So, I think those would probably be the biggest things.
Okay, great.
And one additional question we have here, do you see workers taking advantage of heat safety rules?
No, although in the trainings that we've done, when we bring up that work rest schedule, there is a lot of banter that goes on, and the employers don't like to hear it. They don't like to see that, and they don't like their employees to see those. But it's important, and it's going to continue to become more important. So I haven't really seen employees take advantage of it to this point. But I think that we really need to kind of separate the two. It's not, to me, it's not taking an advantage if it's good information that can help you.
Mhm.
We really need to consider, overall quality of life, for our employees. We shouldn't just be, pressing them to go, go, go. Sometimes we need to pull back as employers and say, what do my employees need to be, effective, to be happy, because a happy employee is a more effective employee,
Mhm.
to be comfortable and to feel safe and to feel empowered, that they have a buy-in into their safety as well, or a say in their safety. Because I think the more that we get to that level, the more buy-in that we have on our overall safety, our overall performance of work. So some people might say it's taking advantage, but I think you will get a much more productive and effective worker if they are feeling heard, if they feel that they're important, and that their safety and health matters, not just on paper but in practice.
Mhm. That's great. And I don't know about you, in my experience, most employees are the absolute opposite of that. We have to force them to take breaks. We have to force them to come off a roof or off the line to stop and have a drink. So
Right.
I've not experienced people taking advantage in so much as not utilizing the program
Right.
at all.
Like I said, they'll joke about it in the trainings, and look back at their bosses. Oh, yeah, see how often I got to rest. But when it comes to working out there, they're going to try and push through
Mhm.
more often than not, from what I've seen, anyway.
Sure.
And we have a company that every year we do a safety day right around this time, and we talk about heat illness prevention. And then a week later, every year there's at least one person that has some sort of heat related illness, because it seems like whenever we have this safety day, the next week the temperatures go up, and
Yeah.
there's always at least one
Mhm.
that either didn't pay attention or didn't follow through on the things that we talked about.
Great. Ariel, do we have any other questions we want to address? All right. Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This presentation will be available online. Am I right? Okay, I'm not saying something I shouldn't. It will be available online for you in the near future. Please feel free to reach out to me if you would like any more information on this topic. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so informative. Rob and CRM provide a number of safety trainings and services. If you'd like more information, please shoot me an email at josie@fbinsure.com, or please feel free to reach out to Rob directly for that. Thanks again for joining us and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.